fun begins.
How's it going?
Hello.
Well,
Greetings, young Jedi.
hello there.
What's up, everyone? Hybrid Toy Reviews here, and today we are taking a look at a little bit of a throwback. This is the Star Wars The Black Series. Kanan Jarrus, as he appears in Season 1 of Star Wars Rebels. This is a repack of a Redbox figure from, like, 2016. They repacked it in 2021, I believe. They reissued all the Rebels on the Galaxy packaging. Everyone that didn't have photoreal got a photoreal update. So some parts of this figure are going on 10 years old at this point, which is bizarre because I remember buying the Redbox one at Walgreens back in 2016, bizarrely enough. So it's nice to finally get one that's a little bit of an upgrade, but it's still going to be pretty dated. I need to give a humongous thank you to Vincent, aka Carbonites. You've seen many a Carbonites review on the channel. This was a Christmas gift from the legendary guy myself. He was going to a collectible shop that I knew had this, and he was like, "Are you looking for anything?" And I was like, "Yo, if they have that Kanan that I saw on their Instagram post a few weeks ago, grab it." And then he said it was gone. But then he gave it to me at Christmas, so it was gone after he got there, essentially. So you lied to me, my friend, but I forgive you. This is a legendary Christmas present, so thank you so much, Vincent. Let's go ahead and jump into the review and see if this guy is a worthy pickup or if it's time to start petitioning Hasbro for some new Rebels figures. Let's go. And here's our Black Series Kanan in the box. As always, I like to take just a brief look at the packaging before getting too deep into things. This is the Galaxy packaging of yesteryear with the tapered side. They ran that for a couple of years before squaring the box off ultimately, but it's still a good box design. You have your Black Series logo above a big window showing Kanan and his accessories off nicely. Star Wars Rebels in purple, his name in purple warning, 4+ Hasbro. This side of the box features some cool artwork of Kanan standing there with his lit lightsaber. This side features wraparound window, wraparound stripe, Black Series logo around back. Kanan Jarrus, a bio about him in varying languages. Pause and read which best applies to you. Really cool zoom in of that side art. He's number 4 in the Rebels lineup. Bunch of legal stuff, Disney, Hasbro, barcode, more legal stuff, hanger tab and window up top. So standard Galaxy packaging stuff. Let's open this guy up and see if he is a worthy pickup. So here we have the refreshed Kanan Jarrus out of the packaging, and I gotta say, initial impressions are there's not a whole lot of difference. Generally speaking, all the difference is pretty much in the head sculpt. So this does appear to very much be the same head sculpt, but just a lot of deco changes. So we will point that out when we get to that segment, but really quick, I just want to blow through the accessories. They're the same accessories he had the first go-around, being his, I believe this is a DLT-18 pistol. Correct me if I'm wrong, I only know that because it's in Battlefront. It is in dark plastic with a lot of silver dry brushing on it. Almost too much, really. It almost looks silver with dark dry brushing, but it is black plastic. Looks rather nice. He features a working trigger finger on his right hand. It's a little bit of a snug fit, but once you get it in there, he can, of course, point it, and it features a working holster on the hip. No strap or anything over it, just the working holster. And then he comes with his lightsaber, which is a little bit big, I gotta say. It's not like a like a Balin Skull big, but just the hilt is very chunky. And just for reference, bringing in a Darth Vader figure who generally has a larger lightsaber, Kanan's lightsaber is just very, very big. And that's something that's been an issue with the original figure, is I feel like he's scaled just a little bit large. But the lightsaber is painted nicely, features the D-ring at the bottom, which actually serves no purpose on this particular one. But it is in a silver plastic, or I don't know what color the plastic is, but it's painted silver, and then it's got the kind of gray control box there, or control panel with the box in the middle of it. There is a box there, but it's a little bit elongated because there's a feature, same as there's a peg here. So blue blade is nice. It's slightly warped. I'm going to have to run that under some warm water. That's just how it came out of the box. But unpegging that, take a look at his lightsaber. Now, Kanan's lightsaber in the early show, he wants to be able to carry it, but he doesn't want it to obviously look like a lightsaber on his belt, so he actually tears it down about just under the emitter. He breaks it down into 2 segments, And this figure can show accurately, put the emitter on the front of his belt, and then the body on the back of his belt. And so many people in Star Wars walk around with random bits and bobs of things stuck onto their belt that it just looks a little bit less like a lightsaber, and that's honestly really cool. I like that Black Series is able to bring that function into 1/12 scale, although, like I said, he runs a little big, and I wonder if they did it in a more correct scale, if they would be able to continue having that feature. If they do a Season 3 Kanan, I almost would prefer them to just make a new sculpt for the hilt and make it one piece, because Season 3 on, he just wears it proudly on his belt. He's no longer shy about that Jedi heritage. But anyway, that's just a really cool ability there. And then, before we knock those off, I am just going to take those off his belt and set them aside. Bringing him in, this likeness, which is not focusing, is really the draw on why you would be picking up this new Kanan. Now, the Ahsoka series has revealed that in-universe, Kanan Jarrus looks like Freddie Prinze Jr., and that's a little bit frustrating with this figure now, because it doesn't really look like Freddie Prinze Jr. He looks a little bit like just a generic sort of dude, and that's the risk that you run when doing figures like this, where you're taking a character from animation, bringing them to real life, and then hoping that they end up looking like the character. A part of me is thinking that when we get that Season 3 Kanan figure eventually, I'm really hoping that it has a more passing resemblance to Freddie Prinze Jr. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it just needs to be close, in range. It needs to be inspired by. And that was always kind of my mentality, is it seems like a lot of the time when they cast the voice actors, they cast people that kind of share features of what the CG model looks like, so I always kind of wondered why Hasbro doesn't take more inspiration from the voice actors on these. But and then in Lucasfilm's case, they just straight up said, he would be played by Freddie if Freddie wanted to play him, and they made that photo of him to put on the dash of the Ghost, so Hera has her picture of her her friend there. But anyways, just to do a comparison, this is the original Kanan. And as you see, even though this isn't a great Freddie Prinze Jr. likeness, this one looks like a toy. It's just white eyes with blue dots for pupils. This one's a little bit more refined. The eyebrows aren't as gaudy. The goatee's cleaned up just a little bit. New Kanan's hair is pretty much just dark brown. It's got some very, very subtle wash in it. The original Kanan had a lot of painted on high areas, and I like the subtle look of the new one more. He has slightly better weathering on the shoulder pad. It's just a little bit more aggressive, but also a little more natural looking. And other than that, the coloring and everything is very, very similar. Maybe the pants are a touch darker on the new one. Maybe everything's just a touch more muted. It's still a yellow for the shirt, but it's not as bright. It's a little bit more of a khaki yellow, if you will. So everything is similar, but it's like they just put a filter on it and just toned it down. So other than some coloring differences and the photoreal likeness, you are pretty much just getting the exact same figure you had before, and he looks good. I mean, you stick him on the shelf, you step back, it's fine, but he's always been a little finicky to pose, I've always found. I like his armor sleeve, it looks really good. They've done really clean applications on the buckles of the chest strap that ties into that. His belt looks good. He's got, the paint on the buckles where it's appropriate, working down the legs, it looks like the costume. It looks good. It's a nice adaptation. But where this figure is going to suffer is in that 2016 articulation. And a lot of figures that came out back then kind of just were what they were, but there's a lot of things that are dated. So this figure features a ball joint on a hinge for the neck, allowing him to look that far up before the ponytail hits on the collar. If he didn't have the ponytail, it would probably go a little bit more, but anyways, he can bury the chin into his collar a little bit, that far down. He can turn his head. There's not a lot of pivot in there, but there's a little bit. His arms can raise up. The shoulder pad starts hitting in up here about that high up. This one goes all the way up, though. No butterfly joints back in this time. 360 at the shoulder. Single jointed elbows. On the sleeve one, can come to 90 degrees, maybe even a touch more, 91, 92. But on the armored arm, that's not quite 90, and that's a little bit frustrating. I feel like they could have maybe cut away just a little bit of this sleeve sculpt here on the bicep portion. That would give you more range, but unfortunately they did not, so that is where that stops. 360 on the wrists. And this is the era, the prime era of lightsaber characters not being able to point their lightsaber because every saber guy needed to have an in and out hinge. And that was high-key frustrating. He has a mid-torso ball joint that functions pretty much as a swivel. It doesn't really pivot. It crunches not at all. Back, not at all. You know, it's a mid-torso swivel is all it really is, and that's a little bit annoying too. I mean, that was particularly bad even for the era. The legs, you can do that wide of a split and kick that far forward. Even on the holster side, it's pretty rubbery. There's not really any back. There's an upper thigh swivel, so to some, it's a good figure just for that. And then there is the double jointed knees that can allow him to kick this far back, and if you miss that, great, but I don't miss anything else going on this figure. And then the feet can point that far down, pretty far forward, you know, that far, that's a bit. And then there's a forward-facing pin for rocker. So, you know, by the standards of figures of today, it's hard to call this one particularly impressive on the articulation standpoint, but also, what are the odds of us, like, actually getting a new sculpt Season 1 Kanan anytime soon, if ever, potentially. Here's Kanan with a couple of the other Rebels figures and the newer Stormtrooper sculpt. And as you see, Kanan is pretty impressively taller than the Stormtrooper, and I just don't recall that as accurate. I remember him being, you know, about the same height as all the other average size guys, maybe a 6-foot guy. So him coming across as like 6'2", 6'3" here, you know, just seems a little bit tall. But you know, I mean, it's not the worst thing going for the figure, but I definitely think a Season 3 Kanan needs to just be skewed down just a little bit. And then looking at the other figures here, you know, Ezra is not as bad. He had a really awkward experimental hip thing going on at this time, but Sabine's looking positively anorexic over there. There are some good things going on with that figure, but there's also some bad things going on with that figure. So I think it might be time to initiate a little bit of a campaign requesting some Rebels redos, if you will. So maybe that'll be my thing this year. So at the end of the day, what are my final thoughts on the Kanan Jarrus refresh? Look, I it's hard to call it a terrible idea because admittedly this did come out like 5 years ago now. But, you know, refreshing something that was like a 3-4-year-old figure at that point with a photo reel, I mean, sure. But it's definitely not aged very well, and that can be said for basically all of the Rebels figures. I think I'm definitely going to push a campaign this year to redo the Rebels, if you will. I think that it's an important enough show, and it's, you know, liked by enough that, you know, we would probably pick up some refreshes. And certain ones, like, you know, like Zeb is probably all right. Chopper, I think, came out all right. But Hera, Kanan, Ezra, and Sabine definitely need some work. And, you know, it's just, we deserve better. This is a figure that I'm still happy to have in the collection. He's a little challenging to pose because of some of those articulation restrictions, but you find a good pose, he looks all right, you know, and I do believe in my shelf test, which is put him on the shelf, take a step back, and does it look like the character? You know, it does fine there, but I can only imagine how fun a Kanan Jarrus would be with all of the modern amenities of a 2026 Hasbro release. It would be so cool getting Kanan into some of those insane poses with the butterfly joints and the swivel knees and just everything that a new figure can do. That's why the Ahsoka flashback Ezra is just so much better than the Season 1 Ezra. You know, I consider that flashback Ezra my Season 4 Ezra. And a Season 3, Season 4 blind Kanan would definitely be my definitive Kanan figure just because of the evolution of action figure technology. So I definitely hope that rumor of him coming is true. He hasn't been delayed too far. I hope not. But I would definitely love to see some redos at some point. You know, we're going back, we're doing some redos of some of Black Series, you know, bigger blunders recently, and I think it's time to go back and do these. We got a new Farm Boy Luke. The original Farm Boy Luke came out in the same wave that this old bad Kanan came out in. So it's obviously a time period that's not too recent for them to look at. So Anyway, that's my final thoughts. Do I recommend it? If you need a Kanan on the shelf, this isn't bad. And again, I do appreciate Vincent for gifting me this one. I'm not trying to tear apart a gift, but it's just a dated figure. It's just a little bit older, and that's all it is. You just got to know what you're getting into if you're getting it, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's just old. So now you know what you're getting. Thanks a bunch for watching. It means a lot that you did. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all those end of video stuffs. I'm going to go work on something else now. So until next time, may the force be with each and every one of you. Thank you again, Vincent, for this insanely generous gift, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.